Hey everyone, welcome to the 358th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot to talk about today. We are first going to be talking about a big acquisition in the smart home space, more on Sig Fox and its descent into receivership. We've got an update on Lorawan adoption around the world that's actually pretty cool. Plus, we're going to hear about Raspberry Pi news. We're also going to be taking a look at two use cases for the IoT where it makes a lot of sense to remove humans and make life a little bit better. Plus, we are going to talk about the end of the NVIDIA ARM acquisition and some more chip news on the RISC-V and Intel front. We'll also hear a little bit about Netgear's new IoT network function, Apple's VR/AR headsets, and the new Samsung Galaxy Watch 4. Plus, we're going to hear from our sponsor Rightpoint about its work with Boston Dynamics on the Spot robot. And our guest this week is Jana Wellander, who is the CEO of Craftful, who's going to be talking about some best practices for designing IoT apps. All of this and more await you. But first, a message from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Hologram. And when you choose a hologram SIM for IoT connectivity, you also receive access to a peerless cloud-based device management dashboard. You can get real-time visibility into device usage, data limits, billing, and more, all from a single, beautiful interface. You can visit hologram.io/Stacy to start your IoT device development today. That's hologram.io/Stacy. And it's times like this that I wish that my name were not spelled 3 different ways. Like that's S-T-A-C-E-Y, y'all, if you're not aware. And why would you be? Anyway, let's get on to news. Biggest news, I think, this week. Actually, the ARM NVIDIA deal is probably the biggest news. But from an IoT and smart home perspective, I'm going to call this our biggest news, which is Resideo is going to acquire the smoke detector company First Alert for $593 million. Wah-wah!
Are you surprised by this number? I know I say this every time a deal comes through, but I thought it would be worth more.
Oh, really? I think this is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, no doubt, but
maybe. So I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day, and we were talking about the Generac deal to buy Ecobee for $770 million, which was late last year. And yeah, this does seem like it would be worth more in some ways because Resideo is the company that spun out of Honeywell, and it still sells products and like security under the Honeywell brand name. So like the Honeywell thermostats, the Honeywell security products that you buy, they're from Resideo. And so First Alert makes a lot of sense. It's smoke detectors. They actually have a connected smoke detector. It's the
OneLink.
Yeah, the OneLink. It's very expensive. It ties into Madam A. I've tested it. I was kind of
if you don't do the speakers, it's not that expensive. I think it's $120.
But and when I tested that original device, I was like, it doesn't make sense to shout up to, Madam A or an assistant up on your ceiling, but it does make sense for a lot of the cool kind of RF sensing stuff that we see coming out. So things like Wi-Fi motion detection, using it for that, or even like 60 gigahertz fall detection. So I think there's a really interesting play to stick certain wireless sensors up in the ceiling so they can look at the whole room. And a smoke detector feels like an obvious place to put that. And Resideo, having a vested security business already, would be a really good place for that. And they also have really focused on trying to build out not just devices, but services. And you can also think about things like a microphone in the ceiling for glass break sensors, right? That's a good way to retrofit a house. So I think there's a lot of, am I going to say it? I'm going to say it. Synergies here.
Ooh, she used the S word.
I know.
No, I agree with you. It certainly makes sense. I mean, so many of the sensors and cameras and other things I put in rooms, I have to put them in there because I have to pick and choose what rooms, right, I'm going to put things in. But if you have a home with a lot of smoke detectors, which you should, it's kind of like already covering the room, just add the sensors, right? So that totally makes sense. I don't know. First Alert is as old as I am, which is pretty old because they were started in 1969. And it's like the brand that I think of, and I think a lot of people, at least in the US, think of first when it comes to smoke detection. So that's why I'm like, really? It's only worth that much? But
yeah, and it's only a little bit more than they generated almost $400 million of sales. So this is not a huge price multiple on top of this. But, but I think this deal makes sense. I think it's a good one overall. And I would also say that this puts Kidde, I don't know how to say it. It's Kidde, Kitty? How do you say it, Kevin?
Yes, to all the above.
This is why we should not be doing a podcast. Oh, well. This puts them in kind of an interesting spot because for the longest time, we haven't seen a lot of innovation in the smoke detection world, right? Kidde just at CES launched their first Wi-Fi powered smoke detector. Prior to that, we had the First Alert One Link. And then from way back in the day, like 2013, there is the Nest Protect smoke and CO2 alarm, which really hasn't seen any innovation, but is still sold.
Yeah, no extra sensors that make a big, meaningful impact, I would say.
That's kind of weird because Google has actually been, what's up?
They'd rather sell you cameras and other things.
That subscription. That's sweet, sweet subscription revenue.
Yes.
All right. Or maybe they're just like, you know what? We don't need to put it in the ceiling because we've got little Google speakers everywhere in all the rooms. I don't know.
Yeah.
We can just stick it in there. Anyway, deal makes sense. It's a big deal for the smart home industry. And there we have it. And keep looking for Resideo is not out. I never thought it was out, but it's not out of the game just yet.
Mm-mm.
All right. Let's move over to a troubled company, Sig Fox. We talked about it last week because the week prior, it had gone into receivership in France, its native country, its home, its headquarters. And the receivership process is kind of like Chapter 11. This week, we discovered that the receivers in charge of this process, they're just like, you know what? We're not going to wait for a long time. We're going to initiate a competitive bidding process for all of the technology assets, customer accounts, and everything else. So they're not trying to put this thing back together. They're like, you've got 3 weeks, bid.
Yeah, originally they had up to 6 months, according to the laws.
Well, that was the
there.
process. Yeah. So they apparently, at some point in time, I guess the receivers looked at this and they said, you know what? This isn't really something that someone's going to want to buy. And if we remember that their business operations are kind of franchisee based, it kind of makes sense. Anyway, so this auction someone could buy it, but they're going to have to buy it really fast. Bids are due February 28th.
I have to get my checkbook.
Yeah, go. I really just I don't know what's going to happen here. Even if someone buys it, what you're going to buy is like this hardware, this highly proprietary technology. And you know how we just don't love the highly proprietary technology, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Would you buy it for the brand and the partnerships, knowing full well you're going to have to invest a heck of a lot more to transition technologies? I don't think this is going to go well. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
These guys have raised like $311 million in over 5 rounds going back 6 years now.
Yeah.
So,
we definitely needed what they were providing, which was a low power, wide area network for IoT. It's just that we have so many better options today, it feels like. I know that sounds mean. The question will be what happens to Sig Fox has 20 million devices out there. That's a lot of devices. And customers. So we'll see what happens to them.
Well, the interesting thing, they say they have 5,000 customers committed to deploy 50 million more sensors in the pipeline.
That's probably not going to happen.
I do not think so. I do not think so. But, if you're bidding, keep that in mind and take from it what you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm out after reading that. I'm out.
You're out. You're not investing in Sig Fox?
I'm out. I'm going NFTs.
All right. Well, they're not related at all, but sure. Okay. Let's talk about Lorawan, which is another low power wide area network for IoT devices. It's a competitor to Sig Fox. It uses the LoRa technology. And the LoRa Alliance put out an annual report last week. I'm not sure why we didn't talk about it last week, but for whatever reason, we did not. And it basically spends a lot of time talking about growth in the LoRaWAN market. So the big facts and figures from this report that's probably most relevant for us is that a lot of people are building LoRaWAN or asking for certification for LoRaWAN's devices. They grew their licenses for certified devices by about 120, which is good because eventually that means we'll see actual LoRaWAN devices, not just for the consumer. Well, I'm hopeful that the consumer, just because I have some really good use cases for some LoRaWAN sensors out in my front yard and backyard, and
like those gate sensors that everybody asks for on their big giant horse ranches.
Yeah, man, y'all got some extensive properties. But also for the industrial IoT, there's dozens already, but there could always be more. I mean, let's just be real. We are not censored up yet. Like, people are using LoRa to track wildfires in California. They are using it inside factories for tracking pallets of stuff running around. There's a lot.
And if you're not familiar with these networks, we just happened to publish last week a LoRaWAN 101 article at a very high level. So it's okay if you're not like a radio chip designer or anything like that. If you just want to understand the basics, we got it.
Yeah, Kevin explained all that for you, because every time I explain it, Kevin's like, why don't you make it easy on people? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. There's so much.
Well, no, there is so much, and there's a lot of value in the details, in the specifics. But, again, for people who are just like, they keep talking about this and I don't really understand what it is. I think I know what it does. That's kind of what we put together.
Yeah. And Kevin, you're so nice. Okay. So there are now 166 LoRaWAN networks globally. Yay.
Yeah. I think there's only like 6 or 7 countries in the world that don't have a LoRaWAN network provider.
Yeah. So this is going to be awesome. And that's enough for that. All right. Let's talk about Raspberry Pi, because who doesn't love a good pie? Kevin?
I love pie, even though it's hard to get Raspberry Pis right now.
Yeah, chip shortage. Curse you.
Yeah, I mean, even on Amazon, it's like, we do not know if or when this will be available again. That's pretty sad, but it's the truth. So a big bit of news this week, if you have a Raspberry Pi, especially if you use Raspberry Pis to like prototype and build IoT devices, one of the, I'll call them barriers or frustrating pieces of using a Pi, you have to have another device to actually use it, at least to get started, because you've got to flash the software that the Pi runs, and you need another computer to do that. You can't do anything with a Pi out of the box unless it comes with the software. You can buy software on a micro SD card. But in any case, here's what's going on. The Pi folks are now getting rid of that requirement in beta where you can do a network installation of the software on a Raspberry Pi. Again, it's a beta, and they're actually looking for help. So I thought worth mentioning, A, for the news, but B, if you're a Pi user and want to try this, they are looking for help and testers, and you'll be on the cutting edge there and don't need to flash images, and it can take some time and so on. So give it a shot.
And just for everybody who's running a Pi and wants to do more with maybe some more modern software applications, Raspberry Pi has also opened up their Raspberry Pi OS for 64 that takes advantage of ARM's 64-bit architecture. And this is relevant for anybody. They've actually had the hardware, the chip capability for a long time in Pis, since some of their 2016 Pis have had the 64-bit architecture. But they have been running the same 32-bit capable OS for the software because they just didn't want to change things for people. They didn't want to confuse people. Now it's hard to find software that works with only 32-bit OSs, right? That only takes advantage of the 32-bit computing power. So
yeah, if you have access to source code, you could, compile and build a 32-bit version of any software for the Pi. But more modern development is,
it's all
just
64-bit.
Not worth it. Not worth it.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. I still remember the undergoing of the 32 to 64-bit, conversion in ARM. And it was a big deal way back in the day. And it was all because of smartphones. Go smartphones.
Yeah.
All right.
And, this also brings up removes another constraint in that you can access more random access memory, basically.
Yes.
They actually do support up to 8 gig of memory because you're limited to 4 gig typically with a 32-bit system because of the virtual address spaces and all that. We won't get into that, but they do they basically do a workaround to support 8 gig or more memory, and this will allow you to natively just support more memory.
Yes. So, good for you if you're in this world and you care about this sort of thing, which we do. Okay. Hey, let's talk about applications for IoT that I think are pretty cool. So we've got 2, and basically the first one is a network of garbage trucks.
Never thought you'd say that on the show.
Sure. A network of garbage trucks in Australia are using high-resolution cameras and GPS sensors on the bottom of their trash trucks to detect basically potholes. It's necessary road maintenance. And this has actually been a theoretical use case for smart cities going back like at least a decade. They're like, city trucks will drive around and figure out maintenance issues. Well, it's actually happening in Brimbank, Australia.
I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Garbage trucks in that area, they say, cover like literally every square mile of roads in that region. They do so regularly, and they do it much slower than a fast-moving car. So you're going to get more accurate results. You have more scanning time and all that. I mean, it all depends on what they do with the data. Do they actually fix the issues?
But there's a pothole.
That's another issue. That's not an IoT issue. That's logistics and budgets. But I love this. I think it's brilliant.
Now, they're throwing out a need for 5G on this because they're talking about, look, they're going to collect all this 3D perception data of the road. It's like 900 megabits of data per second. And that's going to be a lot to upload. That's almost a gigabyte per second, which let me just tell you, that's not real right now. To me, this is not a use case for 5G or a call for 5G. It's a call for on-edge processing. But, your mileage may vary.
Hey, throw a server in every garbage truck. Why not?
I think it's probably more practical than, cluttering up your network and putting more servers in the cloud. That's just me. I mean, you could just process that super fast, real time. Yes, pothole. No pothole. Delete the data, Anyway.
True.
We can fight over this tomorrow. All right. The other project that is similar, but involves drones and litter on beaches, is a project from Oregon State University and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Centers for Coastline Ocean Scientists. That's NOAA's NCCOS division.
NOAA's NACOOS.
NACOOS, yes, acronym crazy. They are building a system that has drones with polarimetric cameras to capture images of beaches to identify trash and marine debris. And then eventually the goal is once they can figure that out, they'll just quickly scoop it up so it doesn't kill bunches of seals and other things living on beaches.
They could use John Deere tractors.
There you go.
Autonomous.
You've got to train those autonomous tractors, though, to be like, right now they're trained for like figuring out, is this cottonseed from chow?
Is that a weed or a plastic bottle?
Yeah. So there's going to be some training. But again, this is a really cool project where it's like making the invisible visible, right? In a way that's searchable and easy to track and I guess grid out and assign people to fix. So,
and it's so much more efficient than having people literally walk these beaches and just, that just takes too darn long. I mean, that's a losing battle considering how much waste is being washed up on shores.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty sweet. Go IoT. All right. we're going to get into it. NVIDIA, they have formally called off their plan to acquire ARM. This was a huge deal. And as part of this, we might all be like, wait, okay, now what? Well, the now what is ARM is making a big leadership change. They are replacing Simon Segars, who was the CEO. He's leaving now. And they're replacing him with Rene Haas, who was the president of ARM's IP group. And Rene Haas is going to presumably take ARM public. So ARM says it's going to explore a public offering. And the current plan is for that to happen within the next 12 months. This...
Not surprised.
It's not surprising. So Simon went and did this deal because, the early stages of the pandemic, SoftBank was like, crap, we need money. We need to get out of this. SoftBank spent a lot on ARM. And, Simon, I don't know if Simon couldn't get the deal done. I mean, obviously the deal didn't get done. I think it was a regulatory thing.
Yeah,
and I think I don't
think anybody could have gotten the deal done.
Yeah, I think this is probably just discouraging. To be the CEO of this company while trying to push this acquisition through in a pandemic. Okay. So, and Rene Haas has been with ARM forever. Prior to that, he was actually with NVIDIA. And this, again, makes sense.
It's probably best for the industry as well.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I thought this deal was crazy. It only became even more crazy as we saw finally ARM get more into servers and in more places like ARM Designs. Now, I will say one thing that may make it less crazy or may open up more competition in the chip space beyond just Intel's x86 and ARM's architecture is RISC-V. And with that in mind, Intel has actually done a partnership deal with Sci-Fi. Sci-Fi is one of the companies that makes a, I don't know.
Chip configurator.
Yeah. Basically. It's software. It's software that basically lets you use the RISC-V architecture to build your own chips more easily without being a professional chip designer. And RISC-V is launched 10 years ago, actually now, as an open source chip instruction set. And I have been really excited about it, probably for the last 5 years, because I think it's a new competition in a very staid old space, but it also, as we enter into this era where silicon designs need to become less generalized, it frees up, it's another option. So you have a bigger toolkit for designing these highly specialized pieces of silicon. So the news here this week is that Intel has said that they are going to create a foundry program that will actually build Intel's x86 chips, RISC-V chips, and even ARM chips. And this is partially because Intel's like, holy cow, we really missed out on the mobile revolution. Mm-hmm. And we even kind of missed out on the AI revolution because of our lack of prowess in the graphing side. And so they're really like, kudos to Pat Gelsinger. They're like, oh, we got to do something. We got to do it big. And that's what they're doing.
And they've been doing it quicker now, much quicker than they have over the past decade.
Yeah. So that's good. That's mostly chip news. I will say there are several IoT startup companies who are building silicon for IoT that are using RISC-V. So this is good news for them. Yeah.
Would you say that this is kind of like the anti-ARM approach?
Yeah. I actually, in a lot of ways, well, yes and no. I mean, we'll go on a continuum. Intel x86, Intel owns it. Intel doesn't license it. The only company who can make anything with it is actually AMD. And that was because Intel didn't want to be in monopoly, right? So that's the most closed instruction set instruction set option out there. ARM was like, hey, you know what? Let's build a core, like an actual, like the chip design, and license that out to people because we need things that are not all x86, right? So it was an alternative to that. And it was also a way to get more companies involved. And as companies built up their design prowess, they could get the more extensive IP license from ARM that lets them kind of tweak the configuration, right? So that was sort of open, but you still had to pay, ARM money. RISC-V, you can do all of this. You will have to pay money to a company like Sci-Fi in the sense that if you want to use their chip configurator to make it easy on you, but it's not a licensing fee for the architecture, for the instruction set. And that's, I think, the biggest deal.
Yeah.
And the most open. So I don't know. Did I explain it like Kevin or did I explain it like Stacy? Probably
No,
like
that was
Stacey.
good. And to be honest, that model, that approach is probably best suited for what you talked about. We need specialized chips now. We can't just have general computing. We need low power chips for sensors. We need high power chips for compute and everything in between.
Well, and we need them to run different types of, machine learning models, right? So you might optimize for a CNN versus a short-term memory. I can never remember the acronym. Anyway, the point is you need to optimize for more things and at lower power budgets, which is really important. So ARM has actually tried to address this with RISC-V, the kind of threat it poses, by making it much cheaper for startups to, sometimes they'll let you have it for free. Sometimes they'll make it super cheap for you to license it for the first production run. So they're trying, but they can't fundamentally escape the fact that their business model is built on hey, we license a core. And if everybody decides RISC-V is great, we're kind of hosed. So I don't think that'll happen anytime soon. Okay, let's talk about smaller news bits. Sure. Let's talk about Netgear.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed this news, but Netgear's one of their latest routers. It's the Wi-Fi 6E Orbi RBK E963. Great.
I know how I missed it.
It actually comes with something I think a lot of our listeners would appreciate because we all try to set up private or guest networks for our IoT devices. This actually comes with its own IoT network that you can enable. You can configure to have support for 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz or both. It adds security. It's not quite as secure as, say, a guest network, but it lets everything on your regular network communicate with your devices. So it removes that whole two network thing. I don't know if I want to call it a subnet or what, but these two networks can communicate together. But it's just for IoT devices. And again, we all try and jerry-rig our own through a vast number of ways and devices. This is the first I've seen where it's a dedicated option, and I hope more router companies do this.
Yeah, Ubiquiti lets you build your own version of this, but it is a process. So this is the first easy consumer thing. I'm going to try to
button.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to Netgear because ultimately, some of this, I don't know how I feel about this because some of this feels a little is it really necessary to have your own separate device, especially when some of these, a diehard security person is going to be they need to be on their own separate WANs, basically. It even may be tied to their own separate LANs, right? So you'd have two networks. So I'm just curious how much this really gets you, or if this is a marketing button, press it and you feel good.
This is definitely more for a mainstream person who, may not even know the difference between 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, right? And what I do like about it is if you've got older devices that have very old firmware or limited old security standards in place or none, at least this adds a layer that you didn't have before.
That's true. Or if you just have only 2.4 gigahertz devices who hate, in your 5 gigahertz device messes with them, you could just stick them over there and not worry about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving right along. We've got an update on Apple's augmented reality plans, we think.
No, this is the first time I feel comfortable saying, hey, this isn't just a maybe. It's not a patent. It's not a leak unsourced. In some open source code, which Apple surprisingly does contribute some open source code, there was mention of Reality OS, as well as a Reality OS simulator. So this kind of confirms that if nothing else, Apple is certainly working on either AR, VR, or a mix of the two in terms of some product. Everybody suggests it's a headset. I think that's safe to say, but from a software perspective, there's a platform that they're working on for this. So that's why I wanted to bring this up, because it's not just some random patent that may never happen. I've seen some headset patents in the past, for example, and I'm curious what sensors they will end up using, what kind of experiences they plan to bring. I mean, we don't talk about AR and VR all that much, but I don't want to get into the whole meta thing right now with Facebook. It's becoming a bigger part of what our future is going to look like. So I wanted to bring this up.
Okay, we'll put a pin in it and we'll keep an eye on it going forward. All right, other little bits of news is Samsung's Galaxy Watch 4. Oh, yeah, this is...
Yeah, I mean, Samsung had an event today, the day we're recording the show. There wasn't a new watch, so this is their most recent watch, Galaxy Watch 4 and 4 Classic. But what they have done is they've added some health upgrades, so that way you can now track your sleep, although they've got these animal cartoony things to help track sleep that I don't quite get. Honestly, there should just be like one, a possum.
No, so there are actual, they call them chronotypes. And so there are 4 animals, like, are you a night owl? Are you a early bird? And it's not it's
an
like
exhausted shark.
Yeah. Well, that's
taking a little too far. Just give me the give me the data, right?
You've got your people really like this. So people
do they?
Kevin,
do they?
Kevin, I feel like you might be bimodal when we talk about.
I don't know. I'm a polyphasic sleeper, so
that's what bimodal is. That's their.
Well, no, bimodal is 2 sleep modes. I'm polyphasic.
Oh.
I sleep 4 or multiple times per day, every day, no more than 3 to 5 hours at a pop. Let's not even go there because people are like, "What?" Yeah, it's not by choice. I'll just leave it that way.
Kevin's hearkening back to our medieval ancestors. Anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is coming for the Galaxy Watches, the latest one. So sleep tracking, always good. And Samsung has announced Google Assistant will be added in the coming months to the watch. So Bixby, be gone.
Yay! Oh, are we yaying that? I mean,
I'm yaying. I mean, if you're a Bixby user and you're happy, I'm sure you'll still have that option. I know a lot of people who are not happy Bixby users and prefer other voice assistants. So,
by the way, I'm an unconcerned lion in my sleeping. That's right. I'm not anxious. I wake up early. I go to bed early. It's all
I'm
good.
a cautious deer.
Are you really? You're just picking one. Yeah, see.
I am, because I have no idea what animal would apply to me. None of them. Sensitive hedgehog.
I like sensitive hedgehog and alligator on the hunt. Anyway, That's good. All right. So that's that for the news of the week. Now stay tuned while we go to the Internet of Things podcast hotline. This is the segment of the show where we answer questions from you, our listeners. And it is sponsored by Spindance. Spindance can help you design, build, and support your IoT product. Learn more at spindance.com. And we would love to hear from you. Honestly, February, y'all are just not feeling this month, or maybe you're not feeling our prize, which this month is which is awesome. It's a Firewalla device, which will track your internet traffic, like all your smart home IoT devices. And it'll be like, hey, you're sending a lot of data to this server. Are you sure you want to do that? Maybe y'all don't want to know.
Doesn't just track. It gives you control over saying, I don't want that data being sent out to that server out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, this is a physical hardware device that you plug into your router. And next week, you'll hear me talk about mine. But that's the prize for February. So call us at 512-623-7424 with all of your questions. I expect many of them to be about Matter, but we can answer others. Do call.
Just like today's question. It's about Matter.
Yeah, today is also about Matter. We've got a call from Sweden. Unfortunately, because you're from Sweden, Eddie, you do not get to be entered to win because we can only send our prize to people in the US or Canada. I'm so sorry. But here's our question about Matter from Eddie.
Hi, my name is Harry, and I'm calling you from Sweden, from the south of Sweden, the city of Malmö. And I'd like to understand if there is a smart home standard called Matter coming up. Is there something similar for industrial devices where you want to connect all industrial machines and industrial stuff? Is there any discussions? Do you know if there's an industrial version of Matter coming up anytime in the near future? Thank you.
Okay. This is actually a great question. One, because we can never have too many Matter questions. And two, because the industrial IoT is a freaking fragmented mess. And it feels like something like Matter would be perfect for that. But that is not its goal. So I will tell you that the Matter protocol is not just for smart homes. They do want to bring it into enterprise and commercial spaces, but they want to do it for like building management. So you're going to see it in lighting systems for buildings and that sort of thing. When you say industrial, I think more like process or discrete manufacturing, which Matter is not going to do anything there. And the reasons for that are those things are...
There's so many.
Yeah, I'm like, how do I say this? There's so many, and they have such very highly specific use cases. Also, a lot of them are very security focused and Matter by what it is with its like focus on Wi-Fi and Thread, which both are radio protocols that connect directly to the internet. Industrial companies don't want their equipment connected directly to the internet. And I'm going to go with like 99% of the cases. It might be connected to the internet, but they want it, going through a firewall. They want it going through like another system before it gets there. And that's primarily for security, but also for latency purposes. So on the industrial side, you'll see things like BACnet, SCADA. You'll see HART, wireless HART. You'll see lots of proprietary protocols. It's hard to say, designed for specific kind of equipment and or vertical in industry verticals. And what we are seeing is this development of like an IoT middleware layer where we're trying to get projects. There's some open source projects like LF Edge has a project that is trying to convert data from a bunch of different machines into something kind of universal that can be then used by IT systems. But for now, that's kind of what we've got in terms of making the industrial process a little bit more easy. And hopefully that helps a little bit, Eddie. And keep those questions coming, y'all. You can reach us at 512-623-7424. And that concludes the IoT podcast segment. Now, stay tuned for our guest, Jana Velander, who is the CEO of Craftful. And we're going to be talking about mistakes that people make when building IoT apps, best practices, and how Matter might influence how people design apps for connected devices going forward. But before we get to Jana, stay tuned for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is RightPoint. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is RightPoint, and RightPoint is a global experience company on a relentless quest to make everything work better. I have Andy Watson here, who is an associate director and the IoT lead from RightPoint with me here today, ready to tell us a little bit more about the work they do. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Stacey.
So, Andy, I wanted to ask you how RightPoint is working with companies to make the Internet of Things work better.
RightPoint has a focus on end-to-end IoT services. If you're just starting out on your IoT journey, or you have several products in the market, our team of IoT experts can help you anywhere from strategy and ROI modeling to concept development, interface design, software development, commercial launch, and everything in between. We start any conversation about IoT around the idea of the experience a device will deliver for the people who use it. It needs to fit seamlessly into their day-to-day operations, and it has to make life or their business easier. One great example is our work with Boston Dynamics on their robot Spot.
I, like everybody else on the internet, have seen those videos. What work has RightPoint been involved in?
We work closely with Boston Dynamics to design and build the Android app installed on the controller that ships with every Spot robot. Spot is a roaming IoT robot that allows companies to automate routine inspection tasks and capture data safely, accurately, and frequently. The application we designed and developed for the controller allows users to intuitively configure, control, and automate Spot in person or through remote teleoperation.
So what are some examples of how companies are using Spot today?
I'm so glad you asked. Spot is a highly capable machine that can provide value in a variety of ways for your business. The commercial use cases for Spot are multifaceted thanks to the onboard sensors and equipment that Spot can carry on its back to accomplish value-add tasks. Industry use cases span across manufacturing, construction, power and utilities, mining, oil and gas, public safety, entertainment, and research sectors, and it's growing every day. Companies are finding tremendous value in using Spot to create autonomous routes, to perform complex inspections, capture actionable worksite data, perform remote site monitoring, and ensure a safe and secure workplace environment.
Great. So how could someone get started with Spot?
We've partnered with Boston Dynamics to help companies experience firsthand the business value that Spot can bring to your company. Autonomous robots are brand new technology to many organizations. At RightPoint, we're leveraging our familiarity with Spot and our depth of capabilities to solve employee, operational, and customer experience challenges to help organizations find value in Spot. RightPoint teams work to understand your company's unique challenges and explore all the opportunities where Spot can provide value before making a purchasing decision. Once we've identified a pilot project, we'll help you operationalize the rollout and implementation of Spot to achieve the greatest ROI for your business. You can learn more about RightPoint and how to get started with an autonomous IoT device like Spot at rightpoint.com/spot. That's RIGHTPOINT.com/spot. RightPoint teams work to understand your company's unique challenges and explore all the opportunities where Spot can provide value before making a purchasing decision.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Jana Welander, who is the co-founder and CEO of Craftful. Hello, Jana. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I am really excited because we are going to talk about apps for connected devices. And honestly, we spend so much time on this show talking about like the hardware experience and what it does. And we don't often spend time on apps because, well, if you're like me, it's like, I don't want to use my phone for anything, but they're oftentimes not very good. So let's talk about what Craftful does first.
Yeah, absolutely. So Craftful is a platform that helps hardware companies make their connected products usable, and in my mind, therefore useful by everyone. And so a key part of our platform is this analytics solution for connected hardware specifically that we're launching this week. You know, generally the goal of our analytics solution as well as our general platform is to make connected things usable by more people. As more and more things are becoming connected, everyone is in control of their connected environment.
Okay, so Craftful helps companies build their apps. And then this week, y'all are launching an analytics solution that actually tracks a bunch of popular metrics, or important metrics from your perspective on what makes for a good user experience in a smart home device. So what the heck are y'all tracking as part of these analytics, and what's most important for having a good smart home device / app experience?
Yeah, so we provide a dashboard that is pre-configured with a few different types of charts, tracking metrics that we believe to be the most critical metrics to track for connected hardware. So the most important metric for all connected hardware is, did users connect the device, right? If they didn't connect the device, it's not a connected device. And so we help companies track connection success at relevant time intervals, as well as many, many other things.
So are companies doing well on that front?
So actually, connection success is not necessarily universal. It really depends on the type of device that you're connecting. So for Wi-Fi devices, connection success may be fairly high. For Bluetooth devices, you may need to take a few tries before you're able to connect the device. So that really, really depends on the type of device that you're connecting. And so we help contextualize the metric you're getting with other industry benchmarks to make sense of that data.
Okay. And what is a decent connection time for a smart home device? And it sounds like it probably varies depending on what I have, but do you have a sense of that?
Yes, absolutely. So a decent connection time for sort of what we call the happy path connection is 10 minutes. So is a user able to successfully connect the product within 10 minutes of having first tried connecting it? And then it can vary a little bit back and forth, but usually if you weren't able to connect it within 10 minutes, chances are you're not going to be able to connect it within 30 minutes either.
Okay. And so if that's like the most important metric, and it feels pretty important to start off with, what are your recommendations from an app design? I don't know if you can go for hardware thoughts, but what are your recommendations for making sure that's easy for a customer?
Yeah, so connection success in particular, there's a lot of things you can do to improve that. Our dashboard really comes with sort of more qualitative recommendations for how to improve the experience based on the data. So, if say connection success was actually a problem, the kind of things you would want to do is to avoid requesting permissions when that's not necessary. A lot of apps will start off by asking you all kinds of permission requests, right? Like, can I use your phone's Bluetooth device? And this is a Wi-Fi product. Like, why is that even necessary? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So minimizing those is a good first step. Minimizing the steps that are needed to connect the product, making it really easy for the user to connect one device and use that device and then be able to do more things. One thing we see quite often is connection flows that then have all kinds of configuration or takes you straight to connecting multiple devices, even though users are very unlikely to purchase multiple devices at once. And so they get confused. Have I now not connected my device correctly? Those sort of things. So there's a lot of kind of simple things that customers can do to improve the connection success.
That's the most important. What are some of the other analytics things that you track that are also important, but maybe not as important as getting them connected?
Yeah, so one type of metric that we track is looking at a user from when they first became the first user until they become a repeat user, and all of the critical steps that users generally take for a connected product, because they all tend to be fairly common across different types of connected hardware, and yet they're very different from, if you were using something like a mobile gaming app or a social media app, where you would be taking very, very different steps between being a first-time user and becoming a repeat user. So we help hardware companies track those steps and identify drop-off, I should say.
And drop-off is just, I stop using the app forever?
Drop-off is usually you've stopped using the app forever. We do have a cut-off time between different steps where we say, if you didn't complete the next step within a certain amount of time, and that really depends on what that next step is, we deem you to have churned, dropped off forever.
Okay. And I think this is so interesting because, again, when I think about my smart home app experience, I don't actually ever really want to spend time in the app. There are very few devices where I'm like, yay, let me find my phone, walking around the house to get it, and then picking it up and finding the app and then, actually using it to do something. Most of the time I want to use my voice or a button or a routine, like an automation. So how do you think this sort of analysis plays out in the real world when we have all of these other options?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big piece of this dashboard is helping you understand, in the context of your type of device, what is the appropriate usage patterns for your users. And those usage patterns could be, most of my users have multiple devices that they will want to aggregate in the voice assistant. And I expect to be able to onboard them all the way to the voice assistant and then pretty much never see them again unless there's like a cloud outage and they need to reconnect the device or something, right? And for some devices, that's not at all the case, or depending on your user base, you may have mostly users who only have one device, which is fairly common across lots and lots of different connected hardware. And in those cases, most of their users are going to be using the app more frequently, but there's going to be a subset of users who are going to be going directly to voice, and you will want to track those different user bases differently.
Got it. So there is a mechanism in here for seeing someone go to voice?
Yes, absolutely. So the voice, one type of metric that we track is features that users are interacting with in the experience. And so our recommended path for enabling voice is to actually be able to do that directly from the app and have the app deep link you to the voice assistance app to connect the product. And so, if you have a path like that, you would see that show up in the dashboard as well. Of course, not all experiences have that, and that's usually another drop-off point for users where they're being linked out to some web page somewhere that tells them how to set up their voice skill and then they get lost. That's another type of failure point that we then help you identify.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and you never see them again. Um, okay. And out of curiosity, if once I've linked my app, let's say I have one of the devices, I actually do have one of the devices where y'all provide the app for, which is the Aware Glow. I have the Aware Glow.
Mhm.
And I link that out to, and I leak that out to an assistant. Does that mean Aware never sees any more data from me again if I never use the app?
Correct. So right now, the way the type of data that we're tracking is really the mobile interaction data. So for the current version of the dashboard, they're not going to be seeing your particular types of interactions for now. The other types of data that we're looking to bring in here is going to be voice skill data, as well as device data to be able to connect your own API with your device data and compare that alongside the mobile interaction data. Those are features that are on the roadmap. And so over time, you will be able to track those kind of users as well through just different types of charts.
So what are some signals or analytics that you're tracking that you've noticed that like apps are just really bad at?
Yeah, so I think one really surprising one when we just started looking at App Store data and reviews at a high level is that a lot of connected product apps have a lot of complaints about users not being able to sign into the app. In the beginning, I was wondering, is this something connected product companies are particularly bad at? And it turns out they're not. Some of them are bad, some of them are better. It really comes down to the fact that users don't have much tolerance for having to sign into the app when all you're going to do with the app is to control some piece of hardware that you normally would have controlled with your hands, right? And so that metric then becomes really critical, like making sure your connection success is really high and also that you're not requiring users to sign into the app too frequently.
Got to keep those tokens from expiring.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. And let's talk about, because you're in this really interesting position at a really interesting time, which is we're about to, fingers crossed, everyone, see the launch of Matter sometime around probably the middle of this year. And Matter is the smart home interoperability protocol. And one of the big promises that it makes is that, hey, I'll be able to bring any of my Matter certified devices into the smart home platform of my choice and control it there, which means I may not ever need the app. And I'm just curious what you think Matter will do for your business.
Mm-hmm. So I think Matter will definitely help aggregate products into some sort of interface. And some of those interfaces will be voice. Some of those interfaces will be still, digital interfaces, because not all things make sense as a voice interaction, right? Like you can't look a video stream via voice, and it's difficult to pick color hues via voice and all kinds of things, right? But generally speaking, yes, there will be more aggregation, but the hardware companies will still need to have a data source to understand how their users are interacting with their product. And that could be a combination of voice interaction, mobile interaction, device interaction, and that's what what Craftful Analytics will help with.
Okay, so you'll still probably connect with a lot of these devices. They still need to have some kind of app, is what it sounds like. And you'll still be able to grab data from that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that may not be a mobile app, but they will need to have some interaction point.
Okay. And then I would say broadly, because before you started Craftful, you were at IFT way back in the early days. And as an industry, what do you think Matter's going to do for the whole connected device smart home industry?
So my hope is that Matter is going to make the experience much better for users that have multiple devices and would like to have those devices work together in a seamless way. I think there is still quite a lot of users out there who only have one or two devices, and so Matter doesn't really address their problems today. So I think it's going to be an interesting future to watch how connected product adoption develops alongside Matter to ultimately have those two paths meet in terms of, addressing the mainstream user pain points. But I think, I'm hoping that it's going to be great and it will offer a great user experience.
Yeah. And outside of even interoperability issues like Matter, there are efforts like Amazon has their really simple sign-on. Google has their, I think it's fast sign-on or fast pass. Basically, these are vendor-specific efforts to get devices on the network really fast, which, as you pointed out earlier, is like the number one pain point. And so Matter doesn't seem like it would help with that, but even having those vendor-specific things might be helpful in the problems that you're seeing. Yes?
Absolutely. And the product we're developing now is really not limited to smart home products, even though kind of a large number of beta customers that are on the platform today are smart home companies, partly because those are the ones we were working in the past. But connectivity is coming to lots and lots of things more broadly, right? Like furniture, transportation, scooters, wearables, all kinds of things. And so the kind of problems that Matter is beginning to solve for the smart home industry, we will have in all kinds of different areas. And we're hoping that there's going to be efforts to help bring all of those devices online and make them easy to use for users faster.
Man, if I think about, I'm just thinking about the durable goods I've purchased in the last 6 months. And if every single one of those items required me to have to download an app, I would probably start murdering people. I mean, it doesn't feel like a good future. So I'm curious, where we draw the line and this doesn't need an app. This doesn't need a connection.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's going to be the key is figuring out how do we make these products actually delightful to use and make sure that, if they require connectivity, it's for a very good reason and you think it's actually worth it. And when they do, that process isn't what we today think of as, downloading the app and then walking through the pain of connecting a device.
Okay, I'm going to trust you on this. So thank you very much for coming on the show this week, Jana.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening and please subscribe.